that's the approach that we took in putting together the export market insights. And with clever statistics from Daryl and some help from Feroz, that's what we've been able to do. So Feroz and Daryl are now going to take you through what is EMI, how do you use it, and what insights can you gain from it that may be able to help you as your business think about export and make decisions in export. We know it's already being used by businesses, and Daryl's got a couple of examples about that. So rather than hear from me, because I don't know how this thing was put together, Daryl and Feroz will take you through that.
Okay, thanks Barry. Well, Barry has fairly neatly, if this works, yeah, covered the first slide anyway, and that is to look at the objectives. He said we've got to provide a web-based facility, supply commercially useful information relating to exports, add value to existing data, and that's an important thing for what we'll be talking about this morning, and really in the end aid export-related decisions for companies and also agencies like FIAL and FIAL. Okay, there were two main, before I get into showing the website, there are two main streams of work. We've undertook a fairly intense program over 7 months of last year, involving myself, Feroz, and a couple of other researchers at the Institute. And so there are two main streams of work. The first relates to filtering of data and information out of the flood. And Elizabeth and a couple of others have mentioned this morning that when you Google, you can Google, you get certain information. But the thing that we've found when we Google is you get that. You get a flood of information, and that's fine. It gives you access to a whole range of sites that you might want to follow. But the problem, and I think it's been expressed this morning, and certainly from businesses that we talk to, is the piece of information you want is really a small stream out of this flood. Okay, it's not the whole flood. And so an intense part of our work really last year was actually doing a lot of Googling and determining which of the streams of information out of here would be relevant if someone wanted to track through a particular topic area. And I'll show how that translates into the ME site in a second. The next mainstream was, as Barry's just mentioned, is to undertake new analyses and develop some new insights. Well, there were a couple of mainstreams of sets of data that we drew on. One of them you probably know of, and that's the ABS and DFAT data on exports from Australia. That gives us a very important picture of the export distribution out of Australia. The other important stream, though, was the United Nations. They have a very large database called Comtrade, and that provides a very detailed picture of imports into countries, in this case the targets that we were looking at in Southeast Asia. And so that gives us a picture of the total imports, plus also the country shares. So put together, we then have an ability with the work we did last year to take 38 food products by the 8 countries, giving us 304, I think, Feroz, is that the calculation? I'm not a statistician. I'm a statistician, not a mathematician. And gives us 304 product and country reports where we are confident provides new information. So those are the two main streams that we've actually followed in this work. And what are the topics and questions that can be addressed? Well, there's potentially quite a range. If we look at these here as examples, and I'll then use the website in a minute to demonstrate them. Existing market assessment and insights, what is out there and which streams are worth pursuing to actually draw information. Then exports, Australian exports to target countries, a whole range of questions, including, what's the current distribution and recent growth, and what are the likely future growths and its possible range. And how might you gauge the impact of something like an FTA, given that we've got change already occurring as a result of just fundamental drivers? The next possible stream of questions relates to imports to target countries. Who are the major competing countries? What's been the growth in them and in the total imports, and also Australia's share? And at a much lower level, what is the competing products and prices? That would be relevant to particular products into a particular country from Australia. And the fourth stream, if it actually comes up. I'm not getting a response here. Oh, here we are, okay. Perhaps I should focus there. Import processes and procedures. At a very sort of operational level, people are asking what are the procedures and forms that are required to take products into a particular country. If I've got a product, how do I go about? What are the forms that I need to actually use to do it, to get it into there? And the final one is, if I, from existing data and analyses, get a certain amount of information, how can I obtain more detailed understanding of demand drivers and future demand, perhaps through more detailed analyses? So that's a set of topic areas and questions that we have been addressing together with some others. And what I want to do now is show, with a bit of luck, if this comes live. Okay, I found the cursor. Right. So bring the site up live. This is the home page for SKU. Now on your desk you've got a little two-sided page or card. On one side SKU. The relevance of this today is that this is a development of the Institute of Supply Chain and Logistics, where Feroz and I are from, and its relevance today is that it's hosting EMI, and the key section that's involved in hosting EMI is the members and projects. In other words, we can set up members and projects within this, and FIAL is a member, and Export Markets is a project on that. And if you turn your page, you'll see that there's a description of EMI in a fairly summary way. The main point is that it actually gives a brief explanation of the 4 pages that now comprise the EMI site, and I'm going to be stepping through those. So as I step through them, you might want to use that as a reference to know which site I'm actually referring to. So these sites contain the outcome of our research, covering the 2 streams that I just mentioned. So if we look at the first...
There's a lag.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Righto.
What this provides is an option that, say, for any country, and I'm going to take butter to Singapore as a product to talk through today, out of that full set of 304 cases that I mentioned. So if we take Singapore as a target country, one of the things we found is that there was an expression of interest for getting guidance on which websites are relevant to say a target country in certain categories, like what are the exports to the target country, what are the buyers in that country. And one option I'll pick up here is target country insights, and within target country insights, which pops up, we found that there's a number of subcategories of information or topics that people have an interest for information in, things like food distribution channels, market profiles. Let's take food distribution channels. And what this does is then link us through to a report that from our searching we found on the web was actually one of the most productive and most commonly used or informative that individual businesses are actually using. Now some of you would be aware of this. It's the... Thank you.
Just need a moment to...
Okay. Righto. One of the... this report is used commonly by... It's from DFAT, Austrade rather, and it's commonly used by people now to actually get an overview. And you find if you filter through this report, it does provide a broad overview, and including things like, for food retail, what's the role of supermarkets? And it indicates that they are quite a key channel for food into Singapore, as it also in other countries. So that provides you, if I can now find, so that's the form of report that we'll get if you track through one of those channels that tracks you down into a particular current site, and you can pull up and access that particular report. Now we find that people are using that and finding that sort of response we're getting is that, hey, it's really cutting down our time in searching. It's helping us filter, and I think Margaret's alluding to that. Sorry, Elizabeth was alluding to that a while ago. Now, that's the one stream of output from the filtering process, and I'll touch on another in a minute. The new area of information comes from the development or the analysis of the DFAT and Comtrade data, and we've developed the set of product and country reports. So if we look for a particular product, and I'll take butter today because it's the one that's sort of an explicit product that was classified in the data we had. And it says, okay, if Singapore is my interest, then I pick up Singapore. Happens to be right at the bottom of the list. And up pops a product and country report. And I said that the broad categories of interest there were questions, people have questions or business have questions relate to what's the export profile out of Australia, what's the current distribution of those. And so the first section is on Australian exports, indicating obviously Singapore is prime, but also Hong Kong and a few other countries are prime target or current significant targets for our products. The first indication of growth is indicated by that little CAGR, cumulative average growth figure down here. Now, as you probably know, CAGR, cumulative average growth over recent years, is commonly used as an indicator of what the historical growth has been, and by inference what it might be. Now, that's a pretty concerning point. It's saying it's declining growth quite significantly. So what we've found is that we then it's appropriate to search the data further and to look at what the actual trend has been, not just over 3 years, but what has been over the longer term. And the picture that comes out, and also to forecast that forward using some fairly basic stats procedures. Relevant points are, yes, there has been a decline, but there's also a strong inference that it may not be a fundamentally long-term shift. There's actually evidence that there's significant variations that are occurring from year to year. And if one projects it in a simple trend way, then the suggestion is that it may not be a continual downward trend, but perhaps a stable growth with a fluctuation about it. But it also raises the question of, well, if I'm going to pursue that market more, I should be getting more detailed information. And part of that detailed information comes from looking at the imports into the country. In this case, the import profile is shown in the next section. And it highlights, first of all, who are the competitors? The competitors to Australia, New Zealand, as you well know, but also the Netherlands and France. Now, this information you may already know. Some of you, it may be news, certainly for the butter product particularly. But what it also, the next output indicates the actual trends and shares. This is 1 year, 2013, the trends and shares. And the important point that we see out of this is that it's showing that the overall demand for butter into Singapore has been declining in recent years, so that downward trend from Australia is supported by an underlying reduction in overall demand of imports. But the other important indicator is that that there's been a higher shift, reduction in the Australian imports. In other words, Australia's share has been reducing, and that's a common story that we hear. So it's two factors are going on here, and that also then poses, if you're pursuing this market further, the question of, well, what would be a more detailed analysis would help me understand the drivers and the actual market shares. So the rest of this report gives you further information, but if we take that prompt as what's the more detailed analysis we might undertake, I'll shift out to another option within in the site, which is the detailed analysis page and tailored analysis. And here we've given some examples. The detailed analyses, I think as someone indicated a while ago, can vary tremendously depending on your need. But for this morning's purpose, what I'll bring up is a analysis or report from analysis of the more detailed analysis of the demand for spice imports. We don't have butter as the example I was running generally, but this is a sort of report that we can produce from more detailed research. The primary findings are that by economic analysis of the actual demand data, not just trend analysis, we can identify what the key drivers are. In this case, it's Singapore GDP, which is not surprising. It's a statistically significant driver. Also, we can project forward the GDP and therefore give quite a meaningful indicator of what the likely growth would be, not just a trend projection. And the further thing, if you really wanted to go to your banker and say, well, look, I'm really seriously looking to invest, what's the upside and downside potential for here? Well, this is a chart which maps that 7% growth figure into what a trend would be, plus some confidence ranges for which we can provide some meaningful statistical significance. So we're starting to see a potential to, we hope, out of this to map into more and more detailed sort of delving from at a very initial scan of existing sites. So that's a quick look at the main sort of sequence from an initial look through to more detailed analysis. The other other page that's available is the other data, and we realised that there were a number of other components of information that came out of the work that didn't fit into those other pages, and at the moment it's captured in, logically, other data and information. But one that's potentially of value, I mentioned that The Austrade report says that supermarkets are a key channel, and that's into Singapore, and it's common across countries. Members or businesses are saying, well, okay, but I'd like to know what products are on their shelves and what are the prices. And one of the things we found was that we could look at supermarkets and identify the top supermarkets and the web links to them. And the sort of result that that gives us is that, say, for Singapore, we can find that the set of supermarkets, the top ones as indicated by the number of outlets there, and their online websites actually provide a very rich source of information. And if we open this up and their page is working okay, we'll find for children frozen and butter, up pops a picture of what are the products are on their shelves now and what are the current prices. And when this came up for one of the members with another product, said, wow, I can now get an idea of what are the products that I'm competing against now, not sort of on average, and what do they look like, what's their presentation, and what's the actual pricing that I'm going to have to try and get to. So hopefully what we're doing is we're going from very broad first cut, if you say, well, I don't know whether I should be in any market, right through to a micro level of what's there now and how to actually guide me. So that's the broad span of the 4 sites that we've actually got, and we hope that actually gives you an indication of, yes, it's easy to use. I'm sorry about the flicking around on the screen, but it was technology, not just me. And there's a range of information you can actually access. And if I drop out of this and say, where are we going from here? The final thing is, which will be of interest to you, yes, the site's had a lot of hits, and I'm trying to move quickly. The immediate extensions are some here. But, as I said, we've got 304 cases now. Butter is one specific one in the dairy area, but we know that other cases have got composite or mixes of products in there, and businesses are saying they want to know their individual products. So what we've just now obtained is an extension with FIAL support and ABS providing the data to go to something like 353 product cases from 38, and that enables us to actually look at a number. At the moment we're processing 20 of these. 4 of them are actually giving us more detailed picture in the actual dairy field. So at the end of March we'll be updating the site, and you'll be able to, for those who have an interest in these particular product sets, be able to access the range of information I've just talked about there for the current products down to that actual level. My apologies, Barbara, for spanning slightly over, but hopefully that gives you some sense of the value out of it and ease of use.